Early autism symptoms and signs in young children. Autism range condition, or ASD, is differentiated by a broad variety of social, communication, as well as cyclical habits that are taken into consideration rather out of character for youngsters. Every autistic person will certainly experience these signs in a different way as well as on a mild to extreme range. However, the complying with 14 habits are considered usual very early caution signs of autism in children. 1. Disconnection to others. Kids with autism often appear remote or disconnected to liked ones, as an example, parents and also brother or sisters. As an example, they might appear to be mentally detached from others and also may not register the distinction between face hints. To put it simply, children with autism typically don't respond any differently to a frown as they would certainly to a smile or laugh. It's important to keep in mind that autistic children are not separated psychologically themselves, they merely don't understand or pick up on social hints as successfully or swiftly as various other children. In addition to not reacting typically to the faces and social hints of others, infants with autism additionally have a tendency not to grin or react happily themselves. They also have actually a reduced or non-existent capacity for the regular back and forth sharing of sounds or facial expressions. Generally, these signs and symptoms will materialize by the time the child has to do with 9 months old. 2. Obvious lack of empathy. One more particular typical to youngsters with autism is that they have difficulty empathizing with others. While empathy is a rather sophisticated emotion and also it can be hard to efficiently spot and also evaluate in infants as well as little ones, there are specific signs you can search for. Usually talking, autistic youngsters seem to have a problem recognizing or valuing circumstances from other individuals' viewpoints. This is due to the fact that they think that everyone understands the globe as they do, which can cause confusion or the lack of ability to foresee or understand the actions of others. As with psychological disconnection, this does not happen due to the fact that the youngster lacks the capacity for empathy. It is simply an indication of a developmental hold-up or impairment that shows the possibility of an autism spectrum condition. Autistic kids have a tendency to have a reasonably narrow as well as a restricted variety of emotions too, as well as compassion may not yet be part of the youngster's emotional vocabulary. 3. Detached to human communication. A lot of children are extremely social naturally. Nevertheless, babies with autism do not engage by staring at the faces of others, reacting when hearing their name, simulating faces, or realizing at the fingers or hands of others during play. Instead, children with autism commonly just do not seem really curious about taking part in regular developmental video games and also tasks, consisting of interacting socially and also imitating other individuals. These signs and symptoms typically begin to show when the kid is 1 year to 18 months of age. As socializing with other youngsters proceeds, the signs and symptoms may come to be extra obvious as well as visible. For instance, by the age of 3, children generally want to play with toys as well as various other youngsters. Autistic youngsters tend to have less interest in playthings as well as seem completely delighted to play alone. By the age of 4, an autistic youngster might be entirely ignoring various other youngsters when they remain in preschool or team play scenarios. 4. Emotional outbursts. In more uncommon instances, children with autism can show unbalanced emotional responses to normal circumstances. As an example, they throw a tantrum inappropriately or show literally aggressive actions to themselves, their moms and dads, brother or sisters, or other children, i.e., attacking or head knocking. They might seem to be unable to control their feelings and physical reactions, specifically when they find themselves in new, unusual, or demanding scenarios. Parents ought to carefully check their kids' social actions throughout their development and acquaint themselves with the essential landmarks and behavioral spans a youngster should display when he or she reaches specific ages. Though fairly rare, these kinds of emotional outbursts ought to be noted as well as documented. That way, if the symptoms establish to a point where you report them to the child's medical professional, you'll have the ability to provide specifics. This will certainly aid the doctor in making a diagnosis if an ASD is indeed the source. 5. Delayed language growth. By 3 years old, the majority of babies start to babble or simulate the language of those they engage with, actually articulating a solitary word when they point to an item or attempt to get the focus of their moms and dads. However, infants with autism might not start to babble or talk until much later. Some will not begin to present any substantial language abilities until they begin to deal with a speech therapist. As a basic general rule, utilize the adhering to standards. By the age of 1, youngsters must have the ability to say a few straightforward, single words. By 18 months, children should contend at least 6 words in their vocabularies. By age 2, youngsters ought to be able to string straightforward 2-word expressions with each other. By the age of 3, children should have the capacity to develop total, albeit standard sentences. Children who stop working to hit these turning points might have autism, particularly if delayed language growth is accompanied by various other symptoms. 6. Prone to nonverbal interaction. Because of the reality that autistic youngsters do not create spoken interaction skills as early as others, they may present a propensity for nonverbal interaction. As an example, they might consider aesthetic or physical ways of communication such as drawing pictures or utilizing gestures to make requests or participate in back-and-forth dialogue. One more indicator of autism is that kids tend to regress in their spoken capability. For example, they might lose vocabulary, stop working to build on freshly obtained interaction abilities, or return back to earlier forms of interaction. Search for these symptoms not only when you connect with your kid, yet also when your youngster engages with other children as well as girls. You might see that while various other kids explain in words communication although their abilities are restricted, autistic children often tend not to. Autistic kids that interact in motions may likewise show an inhibited capability to draw meaning from back-and-forth gestural involvement with moms and dads and adult caretakers. 7. Problem recognizing metaphorical expressions. Commonly, youngsters with autism additionally have trouble recognizing that people occasionally express themselves figuratively. As stated, they may not obtain any kind of additional meaning from behavior or facial expressions. They may not additionally detect interaction cues provided via tone of voice. For example, they cannot identify a delighted intonation from a sad or mad one, as well as unlike kids adhering to common paths of advancement, they don't create the capability to determine mockery or recognize body language. A relevant symptom is that autistic kids have a tendency to have more difficulty distinguishing between what's actual and what is make-believe. While most, if not all, youngsters have active imaginations and can't distinguish between reality and also fiction, the means older children, as well as adults, can. For autistic children, there frequently appears to be no line in any way between what's actual and also what's visualized. Surprisingly, autistic children might display incredibly vibrant creativity, as well as some seem to choose to inhabit their own fictional worlds. 8. Repeated behaviors. Individuals with autism are somewhat prone to recurring actions. For example, they might prepare as well as reposition the very same group of things, rock backward and forward for prolonged periods of time, flutter their hands, or repeat the very same word or expression in what shows up a compulsive fashion. This is among the most quickly recognizable symptoms of autism, as well as it's one most mom and dads will be on the lookout for at an early stage in the child's advancement. Autistic kids likewise often tend to have impaired motor abilities as compared with kids who are on typical developing curves. They usually have a problem learning to hold or use pastels and pencils, and they might only be capable of producing unintelligible shapes when other children their age can attract identifiable photos. Even if the kid is presented to various other tasks and also might reveal interest in them for a while, regression to abstractly repeated behavior is an indication that the youngster may have an autism range problem. 9. Pica. Kids and also even grown-ups with autism are prone to a pica, which explains a behavioral tendency to consume objects that are not food. For example, a child might need tracking outdoors or at school so they do not consume dust, clay, or paste. Autistic individuals might also frequently place fingers and other unsafe items inside their mouths. They might additionally try to chew and/or ingest these objects. Surprisingly, pica is something that can also develop in expectant females, although researchers have yet to uncover a conclusive link between maternity pica and also autism prices in kids' birth to those moms. Obviously, pica poses some substantial dangers to the youngster's health. He or she might be much more vulnerable to microbial infections and internal injuries. While several youngsters try to consume inedible objects, the crucial distinction is that autistic kids will certainly remain to do so at a reasonably advanced age, and might engage in these habits in spite of understanding that the important things they're trying to consume aren't food and also do not belong in their mouths. 10. Level of sensitivity to external stimuli. Sensitivity to exterior stimulations is another very early warning sign of autism. For example, autistic individuals might come to be stressed or flustered when revealed to certain noises, brilliant lights, or certain scents, tastes, or appearances. They may likewise end up being hypersensitive to specific stimuli. Simply put, they will insist on wearing certain things of clothing or colors, prefer spaces with bright lights or loud noises, as well as take pleasure in touching or having fun with specific body components. Several autistic kids likewise show emotional tension when they are robbed of their recommended stimulations. At the same time, the reverse can happen. An autistic child may prevent particular shades, clothing, appears, lights, or areas of the house for no apparent reason. If they are subjected to these stimuli, they may react by snapping or having unusually serious tantrums. Researchers suppose that children with autism have highly sensitive means of psychologically processing these stimuli, which results in the uncommon actions as well as responses. Thanks for watching this video.